So welcome to the 14th episode of Gen Z Investing Insights. Today we have Austin Yoshino, the co-founder and CEO of Joyn. So Austin, a lot of our audience are teenagers, so I'll ask you what your teenage years were like, and did anything happen that sparked any entrepreneurial journey for you?
Hmm, Good question. When I was younger, I guess my first business was an avocado business. So when I was younger, we'd go to all these grocery stores and I'd see that all the avocados that were being sold, one were super, super expensive, but also were really old and almost all was dried out or rotten, right? And so my family has an avocado tree, and basically what we did was we picked all the avocados and went around the neighborhood selling them. And for the first couple of days, it worked out really well. We like balled out at the candy store at school, right? It all went downhill when I tried to sell avocados to my grandparents who lived across the street. And then they kind of told my parents and everything then it kind of imploded and we had to stop doing that. But for a while, it was a cool little like $5, buy a bunch of candy the next day. Yeah, it's pretty sick for a while.
Yeah. So what was high school like for you?
High school was pretty normal, I guess. I was an athlete, played baseball. It was just pretty much. School was pretty easy. Actually, I went to a public school, so wasn't super anything crazy. But yeah, it was pretty normal. Nothing out of the ordinary.
Nothing out of the ordinary. And you went to Hawaii at Manoa, right? What was that like?
Yeah, it was cool. We I dormed, so I feel like I got the true college experience. Was a part of a fraternity, so did a lot of college living life there.
Yeah.
The fraternity life was very interesting, right? Like there's not a lot of places to party in Hawaii. Like you don't have these big like warehouses. So we got really creative, right? Like we would rent out yachts, do parties there. That was really fun. We sunk a boat one time on accident. That was it made the news, but oh well. Um yeah, a lot of house parties, lots of good times.
And you majored in mechanical engineering?
Yeah, majored in mechanical engineering.
Did anything that you learned during mechanical engineering like spark anything that interested you in tech? And did you create anything because of that major?
Yeah, absolutely. So I went into mechanical engineering because I like the aspect of design. I also really like working with my hands. It's kind of counterintuitive now that I'm doing software, but a lot of the engineering principles and engineering process are the same throughout mechanical and software. I think like it's just the tools are different, right? So instead of building something with hammer and nails, you're building something with code. So the nuances are different, but the process and the high level and architecture things are generally pretty similar. So transition from mechanical to software, I don't think was as hard. And like I'm able to understand things, I think, at a level that I wouldn't understand if I didn't take engineering courses.
In retrospect, would you have like rather taken comp sci, or do you think mechanical engineering was the right choice?
I think the obvious answer is yes, but I wouldn't change anything about the path. I feel like there's some insights that I have on the engineering process that I wouldn't have if I didn't have to do that. So like, I mean, I'm sure the answer should be yes, but I wouldn't change it.
Yeah. And after college, unless something else happened in college that made you interested in entrepreneurship, did you co-found any businesses right out of college?
Yeah, so I co-founded my first business in college. I had an idea to redo a medical device. It wasn't necessarily like I wanted to be an entrepreneur. It was like I saw this like big problem. My little brother is in a wheelchair, and so like I was trying to redesign one of his medical devices because it's not very good, right? And so it didn't start as like, oh, I want to be this entrepreneur. It was like I found this problem that I hadn't what I thought was a pretty good idea to solve it, and like I didn't know any other way to do it. And so it kind of then funneled into entrepreneurship. And I was like, oh, entrepreneurship is a tool and a pathway to make the visions that I have come to life, right? Um, and so that yeah, that's where it started.
Got into, is it called Phenom?
Phenom, yes.
Yeah, so Phenom. Tell us about Phenom. What was that like?
So Phenom was a startup in the youth sports market. We started with a live streaming app. And so we did this like right around the time when sports are coming back. So like the market timing was actually perfect where like parents couldn't go to the game. So the only way they could watch it was on an app like, at the time it was called Shaka Sports. We pivoted to Phenom later. And so the only way you could watch it was on a live streaming app like what we built. What we saw though is like as much as the market had exploded and the demand was crazy, like the business model was a quick race towards zero, which meant like everything was you couldn't charge for it, right? It became like who can get the cheapest for us, and so like that's not a race that you want to play in. So we pivoted to Phenom, which is a sports marketplace. We connected professional athletes and kids for coaching lessons. And so yeah, did that, trying to pilot for a little while, and decided like, hey, you know what, there's a lot of things wrong with the youth sports business model, in the venture capital space. So despite the pilot being pretty promising, we ended up shutting it down.
And in the second in your second business, when you had to start that marketplace, what was it like early on? Did you have to source a lot of those professional athletes who could provide the services to the youth athletes?
Yeah, we were lucky. We had an existing relationship with an agency, so they were pretty easy. I mean, we had to go through some hoops and hurdles, of course, to make it happen, right? Like anything, but at least we had the existing relationship, so that made it a little easier.
And then you started Joyn, right? Or did you do anything else before Joyn?
Nope, Joyn is next
Joyn is
on the current one.
next. So tell us about Joyn. Where did you come up with the idea for Joyn?
Yeah, the idea sort of started as like we knew we wanted to do something in the messaging and communication space. And then it sort of evolved into like us looking at social on a macro level and also like internally and what we use social for in our everyday lives and found like its connection on social is pretty broken, right? Like I could follow you on Instagram and like you become one of 2,000 followers, right? That I maybe see, maybe don't. And if I do see something, it's probably some like shallow thing that doesn't really matter, doesn't resonate, right? So we built Joyn with a specific focus on one-to-one interactions that are intentional and meaningful. Um, and so yeah, the idea kind of just evolved. We started off with like, hey, we wanted something messaging communication and it evolved into the mission and the vision that it is now today.
What do you love about building social and for consumers?
Mm, I think what I love most is that you get to solve problems for people that are in your life. I think is probably the most high level explanation, right? Like I can go to my mom and be like, hey mom, check this out. You know, like, what do you think about this, right? Versus if I was building a B2B business, like my dad and mom would have no idea. My friends would have no idea what I'm doing, right? Like, what are you doing? We are automating business for big data so they can export it and have better consumer insights, right? My friends are like, what the fuck? Like, makes no sense, right? I think on a consumer product, you get to touch people's lives that you know and you care about. So I think that's probably the most exciting part.
Yeah. How'd you meet your co-founders?
So my co-founder Dustin, we met a few years ago. Basically, he was someone that my professor said I should meet. The professor was like, "Hey man, you remind me of this dude. Go meet him, right?" And this dude has taken some companies public, so he's very established, very successful. I was very lucky to meet him. And when we met, I basically was like, "Hey, like I would work for you for free." And so I started off by writing some grant proposals for him, doing a lot of not so glamorous work. And then one day he was like, "Hey, I have this idea in the youth sports marketplace. Like, I want you to be CEO and take it on. We'll do it together." And I was like, "Of course, right?" And that was the time where I had no idea of doing anything in software. But I was like, "This is too big of an opportunity. I'm not going to say no." So I did it, learned software very quickly, made a lot of mistakes, but yeah, it's a good experience. And then we started another company together. My other co-founder, Rashab, our CTO, I actually met him when I was in an accelerator program for Phenom, but he was working on a different company. Um, and so like obviously we kind of clicked and vibed and kept in touch since then. And then he was transitioning out of that company that he started, and then I picked him up as CTO. So kind of a funny full circle story, but yeah.
Yeah. Um, Early on in Joyn, how did you guys attract your first users? How did you start building that community out?
Yeah, a lot of our first users and still users today are just people, a combination of people that we know and that we think would be good fits for our test, and a good portion of like I would say about 50% of our users are random people, which I think is really important because like getting friends on your app is easy. And I purposely avoided getting friends as our first just because I wanted to make sure we had something real, right? And so a lot of it was cold email targeting, just being very, very specific about who we want. So our initial audience is in the entrepreneur space. I think the problem that we're solving is a core human need, but a 10x problem for entrepreneurs. And so it was a fair amount of like cold targeting that to get them on.
Mhm. Um, Going more into early on trying to source friends and families versus getting organic random people. Do you value as much, which do you value more? Do you value more customer feedback from those organic users or from friends and family?
Mm, so first of all, I think feedback is very tricky because people don't always give honest answers, right? Across any spectrum. Doesn't matter if they're friends and family or they're random people. They don't always give honest answers. And people don't always like know what they want, right? Um, and so like the approach, but you can't totally ignore it, right? So I think it's a tricky balance. Like the approach that I generally try to take is have you heard the story of the I think it was World War II, but the World War II planes? Um, where basically the engineers were trying to analyze the planes that came back from World War II or whatever war it was, right? And they find all these bullet holes and they would try to reinforce the plane to survive the bullet hole attacks, right? Or the bullets. And the first approach was like, okay, we need to look at the plane that came back and find all the bullet holes and reinforce all the places where the bullet holes were, right? Which sounds logical, it makes sense, right? But somebody else came along and was like, hold on, wait, I think we need to patch up the places where the bullet holes aren't, right? Because that means that if the plane was shot there and then it didn't come back, right? So that's actually the place where we need to reinforce it, right? And that's the way I think you have to take that's the approach I think you have to take when it comes to market research and customer feedback, because you're like listening to what people say and also what people don't say, right? Um, for me, what's most valuable is actions, right? Like I can go and tell someone, like, dude, I love this app. It looks super cool. I would totally use it. And I'm like, okay, cool. I send you the link. Do you download it, right? That to me is a more affirmative action than like, or affirmative response and like, oh yeah, I love this, right? Because I tell everyone and they're like, yeah, it sounds super great. All right, do you download it, right? That's one thing. Do you use it? That's another thing. Do you invite people that you know to also use it with you? That's another thing, right? And so each one of those actions to me are weighted a little more. Um, so that's what I tend to look for now. I've done surveys and gotten like really great results and like asked all the right questions and then like launched product and it doesn't work, right? So I learned that lesson very early on too, to the point where I think it's a mix of what people say, what people do, and also like intuitive responses, right? This is why I think unique insights at the market is also so important, because you can have a North Star. So you know what you're building for. So yeah.
Yeah. Talking more about feedback, going for all the businesses that you've been a part of, how much do you value VC feedback, and do you take it at face value, or do you try and look for like patterns that multiple VCs have told you like this is a problem that you need to fix?
Yeah. I think it all depends. Again, I also look at actions, right? Like, hey, this is not a fit. Well, you looked at our deck for 2 seconds, right? Like then my one liner is broken, or maybe it's just not a fit, right? Maybe you're a B2B VC and we're a consumer VC. Okay, that's super obvious. I shouldn't have emailed you, right? I think in general you want to look for patterns. Like if 10 VCs tell you, hey, dude, like you don't have a CTO, we can't fund you. Like, okay, go find a CTO, right? Hey, you don't have enough traction. Either I picked the wrong targets, picked the wrong stage. So I think it's similar to customer feedback. Um, and I think one thing that I've learned is that there is a ton of people who are giving advice, right? Like, and a lot of contradictory advice, right? The one thing that I've learned and a bit of wisdom from my co-founder is that like you listen to people that are actually going to write you the check, right? If they're not going to write you the check, the advice is meaningless, right? And so we weight people who have written us checks, their advice a little more heavily, right? People who have written us checks in the past or written us checks now, like their advice obviously has a little more weight because we know that they're going to put their money where their mouth is, and so we listen to what comes out of their mouth a little more, right? Yeah.
Do you have any advice for people who are first-time founders that are trying to raise?
Mm, it's hard. It's very hard. Um, you're gonna get a lot of no's. Um, I feel like maybe the trick is not to get lost in it, right? I mean, there's a ton of advice that you're gonna find online, so I'm trying to figure out something that's not super basic, right? But um, I feel like yeah, like raising is a way to get to point B faster, but it's not the only way, right?
Right.
And like if you can get to point B without raising, or I think raising is kind of over gamified, right? Like there is a bunch of money, will also failed, right? And you can say like this company raised $100 million and they didn't work, but they raised $100 million. Well, yeah, they lost a bunch of people $100 million, right? So I feel like just making sure that you're gonna get to point B no matter what. I think that's the best way. Is that's my attitude now, right? It's like
Hmm.
I'm gonna get to point B no matter what. I don't care if you give us money. If you want to and you want to be part of the journey, that's great. But my focus is getting to point B. So if that means like not taking our meeting because I have to talk to our devs to make sure the product works, I'm gonna do that, right? That's my priority. If for whatever reason like the money is necessary to get to point B, then that's a different story, right? And different approach. But I think as long as you can try and take the approach to like, hey, getting to point B no matter what, there's nothing you can do to stop me. Just maybe your money helps me get there faster, and maybe it's a little easier on my life. Then cool, right? That's great. But I think yeah, that should be the mindset.
What has been your take on hiring and growing your businesses? Do you try and really niche down to the specific people who you want, or do you really just only look at what their qualifications are and what they've done in the past?
Mm, I feel like hiring as a founder and CEO is very different than hiring as a big company, because in the early stages, you're hiring to fill needs that you don't have, right? Like it's not about like the most talented designer or the most talented developer. It's like, what is something that I don't have, right? For some founders, they're an incredible developer. So a marketing person is the most necessary, right? Um, the approach that I've developed is I try and look for unique insights, right? Like um the scope of what we do always changes, right? It's not like I'm gonna find somebody like The analogy is like you find generalists to go from 0 to 1 and then specialists from 1 to 2, right? What that means is like if I'm gonna do a marketing hire, like I don't know if I super care like this person is the best email marketer in the entire world, right? As much as like this person is incredibly intelligent when it comes to finding ways to get new users, right? Because like that's the goal, right? Is finding ways to get new users. And maybe email marketing becomes the best channel that we decide, but we don't know that answer yet. It could be Twitter, it could be LinkedIn, we have no idea, right? So I do a lot more digging into someone's philosophy and their unique insights. So for example, like our designer, who I think is really good and been with us for a little while, I specifically wanted somebody with a background in psychology and game design. Right? Psychology is incredibly important for UX. I know like getting someone who can do incredibly amazing graphic design is to me not as important as somebody who has that background, right? The background of psychology to understand why certain colors have a certain effect on people, why specific button shapes do, right? And someone also who has game design, which is like very intricate, very engaging, very stimulating for users. So um that was more important to me than like X Apple, X, etc. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I think going into the future more, are there any fields or industries that you would want to build in next?
Um, as cliche as it sounds, I feel like you have to be building in some sort of new emerging technology, right? Like I think Web 2.0, there is very, very, very few blue oceans left, right? And I think there are limitless blue oceans in anything crypto and AI or blockchain related. So for us, a lot of our focus has been in AI and figuring out ways to have unique use cases for this, not just trying to remake ChatGPT or a layer on top of it. How do you create new experiences and new things for people? So we've been down the AI rabbit hole quite a bit.
Yeah. Do you think there are any like interesting ways that you've come up with of how to integrate AI, like specifically generative AI, into a social app?
Yeah. So the first use case that we found was using AI to generate introductions to people. So like using AI to scrape user
Mm.
data and like come up with insightful things of why we should connect, right? Not just like, hey, Austin, this person you should connect because you guys both like baseball. Like, all right, dude, what the hell, right? It's like a little more insightful, like, hey, you guys are both athletes who or ex-athletes who are now founders. So I think you have that same level of mentality and intensity, right? Like that's it's on a high level, we're trying to find a way to use the intelligence part of of AI, right? I think makes more sense versus like um what's a I don't know, like a data scraper, for example, or I'm trying to find another use cases for this, but like, oh, like scheduling meetings is another use case that we thought of, but it's like you could just do that without AI,
Yeah.
right? Like, the other use case that we just integrated 2 days ago was a Q&A feed, and so like you'll get AI generated questions that you can answer, right? So instead of like humans asking AI questions, we decided what if we just flip it around, right? And that way the responses are still human, and so you create that human experience, but like not quite, but you can still use the AI for something interesting, I think. So
Mhm.
something we're still testing, but something we released and it's showing some initial promise. So yeah.
What do you think is the time frame for AI to, I mean, already with algorithms, AI is really, really integral to the process, but how much do you think generative AI is going to change the social presence or like the social market in the next 10 years?
Mm, well, there was an interesting take from Alexis Ohanian, which was saying that like AI is going to make the numbingness of social feeds really, really, really good. Like we think like hopping on Instagram and Instagram Reels shows exactly what we want to see is pretty good. Like it's going to get 10x better, right? Um, I think it's kind of hard question to answer, but one future that I think is very realistic that I don't want, I think is actually a net negative for humanity is like the AI generated content. You know, like um, I just think that's a crappy future to look on Instagram and see a bunch of AI generated shit, right? Um, what we're trying to use AI for is we're hoping that AI can be a filter. So instead of an algorithm where like it matches based on rudimentary likes and interests, like if AI can use the intelligence parts to be a filter, like, hey, I think like you again, like whether it be a filter for people or a filter for content, I think that's a better social world to live in. Um, but yeah, I guess it'll be very, very interesting.
I think
Yeah.
going to your point of generated content on social, I think the authenticity of on social just for like Instagram and every social app, I think authenticity and just like a real connection and talking to people will become more important. What do you think about that?
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Um, I'm hoping that we live and we're building to living in a world where like AI takes care of all the transactional and all the things, all the rudimentary things, right? Like, hey, it's fine time to meet. Like, maybe we don't need to send 5 messages about that. We can just have an AI do it, right? But then when we do hop on a call, we can talk about things that are actually real. Um, I'm hoping that's I think that there's going to be apps that do different things, right? Some companies going to start the AI generated content and it's going to be catchy and engaging, right? Like I saw this meme where as a social founder, you pick two paths. One is meaningful connection or two is dopamine, right? And I think unfortunately, like, I mean, NPC streaming is a really good example of this, right? Like it's total crap content. It's
Yeah.
terrible for your brain. Like it looks like shit. People look stupid, but it's super, super engaging and super dopamine filling, right? So I have no doubt that some companies are going to do very well in that space. It's just not a world that I want to live in. And so one of the cool things about being the founder is that we get to build the world that we want to live in. And so as long as I'm the founder and I'm in this seat, I'm going to build the social world that I want to live in, right? And that's not that world. So um, I hope that it is really used for enhancing connections and being more human. I would also add that I think, and I've had this conversation with people, like a lot of creatives who are worried about AI taking over their job, right? The one thing that I've noticed, because I use ChatGPT all day, right? Right, does a lot of things for me, is that I think it's now even more important to be more human when it comes to writing or design, right? Like when I write things, like it's very obvious when it comes from an AI versus like it comes from human. And I think that even though technically we can get close, like it just won't resonate, right? Like there is an emotional appeal to us writing from our soul, from our heart, that resonates with other humans that AI I think can never get. So I think like as AI gets better and better, it becomes more and more and more important for us to be more human, right? It becomes more important for us. It becomes less important for us to spell the word correctly and use the right grammar as it is to make the mistakes, right? And have something that has maybe apostrophe in the wrong way, right? Or a hyphen in the wrong way. Right? So I think that's a silver lining in some of these worries, and I hope that we live in a world where that is exaggerated more. I'd say.
I think it's definitely gonna become more important to be human, even on a relationship level. A couple of days ago, OpenAI integrated a feature where you could input information about who you are and give context, and that put in when you get a generated response, it tries to integrate that information it has off you. My question is, if a lot of social apps integrate that, where you can talk to an AI that knows a lot about you, maybe even more because of all that data that the social app is getting from you, do you think people will devalue human relationships just because they think that the AI knows them better based on all the data they have?
Mm, it's a good question. Um, I don't know, right? Well, let me ask you this, right? Let's say there was an AI bot that's my bot and it knows all my social information. Would you rather talk to the bot or would you rather talk to me, right?
I'm sure I'd rather talk to you.
Yeah, but I think the bot could be interesting, right? Because like maybe you'd want to talk to the bot to be a quick filter of whether or not I should be on your podcast, right? That's an interesting use case, right? Like this bot, like, hey, is Austin like legitimate, right? Like I don't know, right? Like you can kind of guess my Instagram profile, but I can also fake that, right? Like what if you could talk to the bot and I could use this as and maybe it's the same way I can do for you, right? Like yeah, okay, this I I want to know what are some questions, like what are the top three questions that you ask in your podcast, right? Honestly, it's kind of a waste for me to ask you that because you're gonna have to look through your film and kind of aggregate that and would be kind of a pain in the ass, but your bot would know it and answer it. Like, okay, cool, let's talk, right? Um, again, I think that's the optimistic future. That's the future that we're trying to build. But I do see like a world where perhaps a creator could spit out a bot, right? And maybe it's a creator that is that is famous for their attractiveness and then there's some creepy issues with that, right? Like
Could be.
I think we can see how this downward spirals into some things that aren't so good for society, right? That is also inevitable. I think both scenarios are inevitable and it will happen. Um, so which one wins or which one is bigger? I don't know, right?
Hmm.
Um, I hope it's the better one, but we'll see.
Yeah. Are there any other fields? I think you touched on crypto a little bit. What else in crypto would you like to build if you did have the opportunity to build in crypto, in Web3?
Yeah, I think the most interesting use case about crypto is the ability to choose the asset that backs your money, right? I think like right now we're forced to choose an asset based on geographic location. You live in the US, use USD, right? Um, but then and I think like the problem with that is it's a single point of failure. Granted, the point of failure is really, really hard, right? This point of failure for a US dollar is guarded by a shit ton of things and it's guarded by arguably the most powerful and funded force in the world, but it's still a single point of failure. Like what happens if we find an asteroid with a shit ton of gold on it, right? What happens if the US military fails, right? All the things are a possibility for the dollar crashing. Like there was this Rick and Morty episode, right? Do you watch Rick and Morty?
Yeah.
Okay, remember when Rick collapsed the international government by just setting the dollar to zero?
Yeah.
Yeah, like I think like obviously that's a very oversimplification of what could happen, but I think that's a very real risk, right? It is a single point of failure. If the US dollar were to ever fall, almost the entire world economy falls, right? In crypto, I think it's an opportunity for you to choose your asset. I can choose that I want 60% of my net worth in Bitcoin, 60% or 40% in Ethereum, or whatever it may be, right? I choose to pick this coin that is backed by real estate. I choose to pick this coin that's backed by stocks, right? So you can pick the asset backing. I think that's a very, very real use case for crypto. Um, and something that I would like to see happen in the world because again, I would not want to put all my money in the US dollar, right? Like it's
Mhm.
nothing against the US. I just don't believe in single point of failures, right? The entire science of finance is on diversification is about diversifying a portfolio in the safest way as possible, right? Yet our financial dollar has a single point of failure, right? Again, I'm not a fintech expert. This is just my observations from an outside point of view. But I think it is like a very, very real use case for this.
I think I saw an app on Twitter yesterday, and it was trying to tokenize social relationships. I forgot
Mm,
what the technicalities of it were, but I think you could send a specific coin to a friend. So like if I wanted to send Austin a coin, I could say this is a Jacob and Austin coin, and I forgot what the other functionality of that is. But building off of that, what if you had a coin between me and my dad, and as that relationship increases over time, so does the value of the coin. Do you think there's any value in trying to tokenize like relationships and connections with people?
I don't know. I think it sounds cool. And for social things, sounding and being cool is enough, right?
Yeah.
But I struggle with like, so what? Like you and I have a coin, so what, right? Like, who
Mhm.
cares? Like, maybe if you're Justin Bieber, that's cool, right? But like Jacob and Austin, like, who cares, right? Like, what's the point of it, right? I don't really know, right? Um, I think maybe there's a play for blockchain and social accountability, right? Where like I was listening to a podcast with Alice Cooper and Madison Beer, and it was talking about how Madison's news had gotten leaked, and there was basically no accountability for anybody that had posted it, and there were some really really creepy and disturbing things that happened, like guys were reposting it with God knows what, right? And she was like 14, right? And there's no accountability, right? I think because everything on the blockchain is inherently tracked, can be transparent and traced back to every micro interaction, there is a real use case for that, right? But then on the flip side, the other side is like, well, like what happens if people change, right? Like, I I know some examples of like when the BLM movement was a big thing. There were some people who had said some not so great things, right? And like I don't condone it. I think it's messed up, right? But these people had came out and was like, look, man, I'm really sorry, but I was like 13 and super stupid at the time, right? Like I don't know what the right answer is. Like, should they be held accountable? Yes, but should they also be allowed to change? I think so too, right? So I think blockchain could inherently like make that not thing, right? Like you're held accountable to every single thing you do. Is that a good thing for society? Yes. Is it also a bad thing? Yes, too, right?
Yeah. I
I don't
think
know.
I think if the important thing to me is who has control over that data. Does the government have control over that data? Am I gonna be spied
Mm,
on a lot? Because post 9/11, I mean, when the NSA was set up, like you get people like Edward Snowden who are saying that the government has control over a lot of your life, knows a lot about you. And if all of that was on the blockchain, who would have power over all that information? Um,
mm.
that's the first thing that comes to mind for me.
I think it would be everybody, right? The technical part about blockchain is that everybody owns a little piece of it. And so like for Ethereum, the big part about the merge was that like I think it had to get approved or the reason why it was so hard to roll out is because of that ownership, right? Of everyone owns a little micro part of it. And so like to hack the blockchain, you have to get 51% of it, I think, right? It was an episode of Silicon Valley that talks about that. So that to me, like it's not owned by it's not owned by anybody and it's owned by everybody. It's kind of the gist there, right? Um, so it's not, but it's all transparent, right? So the government doesn't own it, but they can see it. Um, so like Apple safeguarding your messages when they get subpoenas because you may have done a drug deal doesn't work on the blockchain, right?
Right.
Apple saying fuck you to the government doesn't happen, right? Um, um, yeah, I don't know what we should do there.
Mhm.
Um,
All
yeah.
right. Anything else you want to touch on before we end it?
Mm, no, not much. I think that was cool. Good conversations.
Yeah. All
Yeah,
right. Thank you for coming on the podcast. It was a pleasure talking to you.
of course. Thank you for having me.